Yeah, very good afternoon to the viewers of this very important virtual CP meeting of being organized by Research Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India on a very pertinent topic, very timely, understanding the economic cooperation and trade agreement ECTA between India and Australia in light of research study on how Indian companies can play a pivotal role in supply chain of Australia. We have the presence of Honorable Vice President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, CA Aniket Sunil Talati ji, the Honorable Additional Secretary of Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Sri Amit S. Yadav sir. We have the presence of my chairman, CA Anuj Goyal ji, Chairman Research Committee, and we are very fortunate enough that the person who is behind this study, CA Dr. Achinto Roy, is with us. He is kind enough to give time from Australia to address the delegates. We have the presence of CA Raj Kapoor ji, Chairman, Netherlands chapter of ICI, and with request, my Chairman, CA Anuj Goyal ji, for formal welcome address.
Thank you, Dr. Amit Agarwal ji. Very good afternoon, friends. Very distinguished, our Honorable Vice President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, CA Aniket Sunil Talati sir. We are having the presence of our Honorable Chief Guest, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, Sri Amit S. Yadav sir. Welcome sir on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Research Committee. We are having very prominent resource person, very prominent researcher from Australia, from Deccan University, CA Dr. Achinto Roy sir. And we are having the Chairman of New Zealand chapter, CA Raj Kapoor ji, our Honorable President, CA Dr. Devasis Mitra sir, is joining us very soon. And friends, very important topic we are having, understanding economic cooperation and trade agreement, ECTA, between India and Australia in light of research study on how Indian companies can play a pivotal role in the supply chain to Australia. And fortunately, the researcher was Achinto. We are really good that fortunate that we are having the researcher like Achinto Roy sir, and we are proving ourselves as the real partner in nation building. We are trying to have the best of the research projects, which can be very helpful for the country, for the various state government, for the various central governments, various government departments, and this initiative of the government of India, I think it will go a long way. Similarly, in the same line, we are trying to have something for New Zealand also. And as we are having the chairman of New Zealand chapter in presence of Aniket sir, we will certainly request them that how, as a brand ambassador of the Chartered Accountants, we can try to see that how he can work as a bridge between Indian government and the New Zealand government. And friends, as rightly remarked, change is the end result of all true learnings. Keeping that in mind, we at ICI regularly to continuously update and educate our esteemed members to enhance their professional competency and growth through conducting various knowledge enriching webinars and VCMs on contemporary topics of economic research and related areas. And research committee has taken a lot of initiatives in the recent past under the able leadership of our Honorable President and Vice President, sir. We are having the International Research Award. This will be the third International Research Award, and Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is the only accounting body which has come out with the International Research Award, in which we are having the participation from each and every part of the world. Then we introduced ICI Research Project Scheme, in which we are trying to see that how our chartered accountants, who are one of the best accounting professionals across the globe, how they can really do something very concrete, not only for the accountancy profession, but also for the economy, for the development of economy. And we have introduced ICI doctoral scholarship scheme, in which young chartered accountants, we are trying to handle them, and we are trying to see that how we can have the best of the researchers in the chartered accountants by handholding. And now we are really very happy. A lot of our research findings have been submitted to the various state governments and the central governments and various central government departments, and that it has resulted that the income leakages can be stopped, and we have tried to see that how the revenue can be increased. Friends, no matter what career field you are in or how high up you are, there is always more to learn. The same applies to our personal life also. No matter how many experience you have or how diverse your social circle, there are things you don't know. Research unlocks the unknowns, lets you explore the world from different perspectives, and fuels a deeper understanding. In some areas, research is an essential part of success. In others, it may not be necessary, but it has many benefits. It would not be wrong to infer that going forward, there is going to be an immense opportunities for our esteemed chartered accountants in the field of research. And friends, today we will be discussing about economic cooperation and trade agreement, ECTA, between India and Australia. India-Australia trade in goods presently stands at about US $19.23 billion for the period of April 21. And our past president, Sunil Talati ji, is the pioneer to have this breakthrough between India and Australia. Due to the trade agreement between the two nations, trade is expected to grow significantly in the next 5 years. Even though the ECTA is interim at present, but it has already provided substantial concessions for various industries like textile, leather, etc., and included various factors to promote trade in services, while further clarity with respect to other issues such as non-tariff barriers is awaited. Now, without taking further time, as we are very, very eager to hear our Honorable Vice President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, our incoming President, C. Aniket Sunil Talati sir, I will request to enlighten our knowledge with his rich experience and wisdom. He is from Modi ji's place, or rather I will say Modi ji is from his place, from Ahmedabad itself. May I request all of you to put your hands together in welcoming our Honorable Vice President, C. Aniket Sunil Talati. Over to our Honorable Vice President, C. Aniket Sunil Talati.
Thank you so much, Anuj bhai, the very respected senior council member and chairman of this very important committee of the Institute, the Research Committee. And let me first of all say it without any hesitation that the Research Committee has been brought to the fore and in the limelight of the Institute under the leadership of Anuj ji over the past 3 years, sir. My heartiest compliments. Sir, the research awards that you have done, the doctoral scheme that you are doing, and various other publications that your committee regularly comes up with has actually put the Institute in the forefront in terms of doing research activities. And I once again compliment you and your Vice Chairman and the entire committee, Amit ji, and all the staff for the wonderful work you are doing in this research. To the Honorable Chief Guest, Amit Yadav ji, Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce Industry, a very good afternoon, sir. We had the pleasure of meeting the Honorable Minister yesterday, sometime this, at 4 p.m. only, Mr. Piyush Goyal ji, and we spent some good time with Honorable Minister, sir, and of course, he's a proud member of the Institute, and it was always a pleasure discussing with him, and sir, we look forward to hearing from you on this very important economic cooperation and trade agreement that India and Australia have signed. In fact, sir, let me share with you that the past Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Tony, when he visited India at the Institute, we had the opportunity to have a very good interaction with him. And he also played a very important part in this agreement. And we discussed ways in which chartered accountants can play this role of collaborating with the Australian government business to ensure that trade on both sides of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, of course, is increasing in that sense. Like Anuj bhai mentioned, my father, who's chairman of the Service Export Promotion Council, had the privilege to be in Australia when Honorable Minister was visiting Australia, and entering into this agreement. And at service ports also, it's very important that chartered accountants, and today I'm proud to say maybe thousands of our chartered accountants are involved in accounting and other related works which are from Australia. And this work is only going to increase in the future as the capabilities of chartered accountants is endorsed by the Australian business, Australian professionals. I am happy to see the phenomenal growth, these KPOs in my state, like Anuj bhai mentioned Gujarat, where I come from, and now across India, I'm seeing so many firms getting into Australia accounting work. And I can maybe Rajji and Mr. Roy can vouch for it. But I think more accounting of Australia happens today in India than would happen in Australia itself, at least the bookkeeping aspect. And this is going to increase further as we move forward. And therefore, chartered accountants have a very important role in this aspect of service export. Going to be also very important is how we are as chartered accountants able to understand this trade agreement for the benefit of our clients and guide them. What are the kind of avenues and opportunities this is going to open up for our chartered accountants in consulting area, where we can have our clients look at export to Australia, look at having greater presence and market access to Australia. And for this, I am sure the best role that can be played is by chartered accountants here, who are trusted advisors and consultants of all corporates. Yes, even in Australia, one has seen that the +1 is being promoted and they are looking at alternate sources for having various goods, products and services. And India is going to be the natural destination of choice. So I'm extremely confident that with this trade agreement, elimination and lower tariffs on huge goods on both sides, the two-way trade is going to increase tremendously. This will not only help us as professionals in service export, not only help our clients to have better market access, but most importantly will underline and underscore the role of chartered accountants, because we proudly say we are partners in nation building. Through programs like this, which Anuj bhai is conducting, and the kind of knowledge dissemination we will be able to do to our membership for the benefits of these trade agreements, I am sure the days are extremely bright for India-Australia relations, and more importantly for Indian companies looking to have a market access there. With this, let me compliment once again the entire committee, Anuj bhai, the Vice Chairman. I thank the faculty, Dr. Roy, as well as Raj Kapoorji, who are here. And most importantly, a very, very warm welcome once again, and a special thanks to our chief guest, Shri Amit Yadav ji, the Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, who will be guiding us. And sir, let me assure you on behalf of the Institute, we will definitely put everything possible to ensure that we play our role in partnering in nation building, help not just our growth of our clients, but growth of the nation as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Vice President, sir. We'll certainly try to see that how we can come up to the expectations of the ministry. We can come up to the expectation of Aniket Talati, sir. We can come up to the expectation of Piyush Goyal ji, who is our own. And we'll certainly put our 100% to see that how our country can really reach to a stage which position is deserved by our country. So thank you very much. We are having the presence of Amit Yadav, sir, our Honorable Additional Secretary, Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And his educational qualifications are MBA and LLB, belongs to 91 batch of Indian Administrative Service. And during the last more than 30 years of his career, Amit Yadav ji has worked in various positions in state government, central government and international organizations. And from 1993 to 2006, he worked in various capacities in different departments of state governments of Delhi, Goa, and Arunachal Pradesh. He has also worked as civil affairs officer in the United Nations and as consular at the Permanent Mission of India, WTO, in Geneva. And from 2019 to 2021, he was Director General in Directorate General of Foreign Trade. At present, sir is heading trade negotiations, multilateral division in Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. On behalf of more than 1,000 chartered accountants present, and on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I welcome our Honorable Chief Guest Amit Yadavji, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. We are having the presence of our Honorable Central Council member. I welcome RK sir also, and may I request our Honorable Chief Guest, Sri Amit S. Yadav sir, to address all of us. Very, very big round of applause, friends.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. And thanks especially to the ICAI for organizing this event and the lead taken by the research committee of ICAI in this regard, and showing the interest on the India-Australia agreement and coming out with a report by Mr. Achinta Roy. I would also like to place on record the interaction we've had earlier with the Institute on a number of occasions from the Ministry of Commerce, where obviously we have enriched with each other's discussions from various officials of ICAI from time to time. So I think so this bond is quite strong, and it nourishes, and we learn from each other. And I hope that it continues. Obviously, in the recent time, we have had two significant FTAs, and one of the FTA was with the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and the other, which was with Australia. These are significant in the sense that these are after almost a gap of almost 10 years that India has entered into the bilateral trade regime of signing agreements. And the signing of agreement with Australia becomes much more significant because after almost 10 years, India has signed an agreement with a developed country. With all of that in background, and also that there was shared understanding between both countries on various issues, the large amount of consultations which we took with the various stakeholders, both in goods and services, across commodities and across services before entering into an agreement. And also at the same time, ensuring that both the countries' sensitivities on various aspects were to be addressed in the final agreement are all significant for the shape in which the agreement has now emerged. I also need to point out that the negotiations started, or the discussion started with an interim agreement and at a low level of ambition of agreement. But the way it has emerged, though it's still an interim agreement with a final comprehensive to be negotiated once the entry into force happens for the agreement. In the Indian process, it's a ratification, but while in the Australian process, it needs a parliament approval before it is entry into force happens. For Australia, as you would be aware, the elections for the parliament were held recently. Only on 21st May, the results came out, and a new government has come into place. And so therefore, thereafter, it will go through its parliament approval processes before the agreement comes into entry into force. These are all to point out where we are. And the important thing is the coverage of the agreement. The coverage of the agreement has the goods agreement, the services agreement, the SPS, TBT, and various annexes on services, various annexes on recognition, annex on in the services sector again on the movement of people. Then we also have annex on pharma. When we were examining the trade between the country, the bilateral trade is at present in favor of Australia, both in goods and services. And almost 74% of the trade which comes from Australia for goods is from the coal. And then the other components. So that's a significant contribution in the bilateral goods. On the services, there are two major components which gives a balance of trade in favor of Australia. One is with regard to the tourism services, and second is the education services. We also need to keep in mind that there is a large Indian diaspora which is present in Australia. So that influences both the presence of large number of students and the large tourism which takes place because of the diaspora. There are other components in the agreement besides goods and services, which is SPS, TBT, and so on and so forth, which makes it a comprehensive agreement. But as I said, that both sides, when they started with the early harvest agreement with a low level, but landed up with the agreement which was from the Australian side, it's almost 100% goods are covered in the agreement as part of the agreement. So it's comprehensive coverage. Similarly, from the Indian side, by way of trade and by way of lines, we are covering around more than 70% of lines and almost 85% of trade in the agreement, which makes it agreement which is compatible with the WTO agreements on bilateral. Also, during the agreement, certain sectors of interest were taken up, which find specific mention in the agreement, whether it's a specific ask for Australia for wines and certain fruits for market access to India. But similarly, on the services, there has been a demand from the Indian side on a huge comprehensive list cutting across both federal and sub-federal level. So it almost 135 subsectors have been included in the agreement on the services side, which makes it one of the most ambitious agreement Australia has signed with any country on the services side. So 100% coverage on goods side, 135 subsectors on the services side are part of the whole thing. There are also components which will facilitate interest of India, like we had analyzed and seen that on the pharma sector, there was a requirement, there was a very small contribution of Indian export. And we realized that pharma, when we are supplying to the other parts of the world, why are we having challenges on supplying pharmaceuticals, drugs and medicines to the Australian side? We have come out after understanding their regime and discussion that it's a fairly highly strict regulation which exists. And then therefore we talked about a pathway. The pathway is the Therapeutics Goods Authority. If it has recognized certain other countries, like they have done for Canada and European Union, that would, we have said that if Indian companies have also been recognized by a Canadian drug regulator or a European Union drug regulator, then those would be fast-tracked for approval processes because they meet those conditions which are there. There may be certain gaps which are there. I believe and I understand there is already between India and Australia a mutual recognition agreement exists for the chartered accountants. And I believe more than 1,500 Indian chartered accountants are practicing in Australia. So I think so that is one template which already exists. We want to carry it for other professions with a mutual recognition. on other profession, especially on the health services part of it. A large Indian presence is also there on the IT and IT-enabled services, where most of the top four companies of the country have a huge turnover. One of the challenges that, and which would be of interest for you as the chartered accountants, was the double taxation treaty agreement, which was due to which the benefits were not getting passed. It was old DTA, and it had certain provisions which was impacting the IT and IT-enabled services to pay income tax there. After very hard negotiations, we have been able to. This would actually, because Indian companies went before, challenged the tax regime before the Australian Supreme Court and lost. So in that sense, it had the regime which was there being covered under the DTA was confirmed by a judicial order. We have now persuaded, as part of the agreement, for the Australian government to amend their law, income tax law, so that the double tax which is being right now imposed on despite the DTA being there for the IT companies, that would be addressed by way of amendment to in the Australian Income Tax Act. So I'm just telling some instances of how in a bilateral negotiation there are some asks which have to be addressed, and there are certain asks which need to be sensitive of. It's a give and take which both countries have followed, and with a lot of trust which happened, that we have been able to conclude this agreement. Once it started in a right earnest from beginning of January this year, for the signing of the agreement between the prime ministers of both sides being present, though the agreement was signed between the two trade ministers on 2nd April. So in almost 3 months plus, we have been able to conclude the negotiations, working tirelessly across time zones, as the colleagues from the chartered accountant from the Australian side would know that the time differences are there. So either the Indian side had to work late at night, or the Australian side had to get up very early. So that is how we worked to get this agreement. And we had sensitivity with regard to dairy and other sectors which we didn't want to open, and we managed to do it. The other very important thing was the rules of origin, and within the rules of origin, because there is a concern that since Australia is integrated with a large number of bilateral, including the ASEAN and the other countries and RCEP, that there could be challenges of those goods taking benefit under the India-Australia agreement. But we have also managed to have put in certain safeguard provisions, including the rules of origin criteria, to ensure that to a large extent, or I should say not a large extent, to a great extent, this circumvention or trade diversion, as I would say, may not be possible under the bilateral trade agreement, because obviously a trade agreement is between two countries and not other goods of other countries or to benefit under this agreement. Similarly, we have also put in a safeguard mechanism that for 14 years, any changes in the tariff regime leading to surge a bilateral safeguard mechanism will be applicable. And also put in a review mechanism out of experience of other FTAs, where the review mechanism has been initiated but never completed. So we put in a provision for the review mechanism also. So and also for ease of movement of professionals and the large number of, we have more than 1 lakh Indian students studying in Australia at any given point of time. So opportunities for all of these students to work post-study in Australia for getting work. And it would range from the nature of the degree they have, from a bachelor to a research kind of degree, and especially on the stem cell subjects. So they can stay up to 4 years post-study, from a range of 18 months to 4 years, depending on their qualification, post-study to work in Australia. So that is quite significant. We have also various categories of Indian moving as intra-corporate transferees, contractual service suppliers, or even as independent professionals for the visa regime. We have got a part of the binding commitment in the agreement. So I think a huge gain for both sides, and our attempt would be over a period of time to ensure that the gaps in the bilateral trade, both on the goods and services, which right now find a balance in favor of Australia, gets covered. And as part of this, we have immediately after signing of agreement, have had an outreach exercise, which across various cities we have we've covered. Gujarat, in Gujarat we have covered Surat, we have gone to Bangalore, in Karnataka we have gone to Chennai, in Tamil Nadu we have gone to Hyderabad, and shortly we are having one in Agra. So the whole objective is to outreach and make businesses aware, both on goods and services, of the benefits this agreement is. So once the agreement comes and is entered into force, the benefits should be immediately reaped rather than going over a long period of time. And I believe that with active support from the various stakeholders and including the ICA members, the gains of this agreement and how Indian industry and Indian entrepreneurs and Indian businesses can benefit, can be translated and can help in increasing the exports and a stronger bilateral trade between both sides. So I compliment the ICA and also the president, vice president, and also the research committee for organizing this. And I just have one request. Though you had scheduled it till 6, I will have to leave at 5:30. So we can have more time for interactive question-answer session and so on and so forth. But we'll have to close. At least I will have to leave by 5:30 with regard to this interaction. So thank you and for giving me an opportunity. And the second part of the final comprehensive, as I said, will be done once the talks will start, but the conclusion will only be after the interim agreement is entered into force. We expect in a couple of months, because the parliament has come up in Australia. The ministers have been recently, in fact, the trade minister has taken over only today, the new trade minister. So in a couple of months, it will be introduced in parliament, get approved, and thereafter, everyone can take benefit of this agreement, which I think so is huge coverage both on goods and services, and a way forward for further integration of economies of both the sides. So thanks, and I'm open for an interaction later. Thank you.
Thank you, Yadav sir. We are having the presence of our Honorable President, CA Dr. Devasis Mitra sir. And before we will have the session of CA Dr. Chinto Rai, and of course the question answer session in which Yadav sir will also be there, may I request our Honorable President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, CA Dr. Devasis Mitra sir, for his address, for his words of wisdom. Dr. Mitra, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Anuj Goyalji, the Chairman Research Committee of the Institute, Sri Amit Yadav, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Thank you for your kind presence amidst us. The Honorable Vice President of the Institute, Aniket Talati, Rajendra Kumar P, Council Member, and everybody else who are present, listening to me. A very, very good evening to all of you from India. Great pleasure to see that the Institute is organizing this program on relations between India and Australia. And a greater pleasure to see that the ministry is also involved in organizing this program. You see that you are participating in this program. India and Australia, we have had excellent relationship, not only from the trade, but you see, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, we have a MOU going with the CPA Australia. So, and then we have overseas chapters in Australia, say for example, Melbourne, Sydney, we have our own overseas chapters. So we do everything possible to see that the link between India and Australia remains vibrant, and that relations, in addition to the professional relations that we have between the two countries, the trade relations also remain vibrant. So I'm very happy to see the research committee under the able leadership of Anuj Goyal and then the vice chairmanship of Umesh Sharma organizing this program. And I'm sure, Mr. Yadav, as time progresses, we will have more such programs, and we look forward to seeing you amidst our midst in the Institute, in our headquarters at ITO. So thank you very much for your kind presence once again. And to everybody else, I wish all of you very happy learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our Honorable President, sir. And we will certainly see that how we can have the presence of Yadav, sir, here at Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And we will have a very, very fruitful interaction when Yadav, sir, will be here. We just met Yadav, sir, 15 days back, and we are having the presence of CA Dr. Achinto Rai ji, who has written this how Indian companies can play a pivotal role in the supply chain to Australia, our research project he has undertaken when our Honorable President, sir, was the member of the shortlisting committee, the chairman of the shortlisting committee. So our Honorable President, sir, is the pioneer in that, and our Honorable past President, I was just discussing Sunil Talati, sir, who is the chairman of SCPC, is the key person for making bridge between Indian Chartered Accountants and Australian Chartered Accountants, India and Australia, and come out with the economic cooperation and trade agreement. So thank you very much, President, sir, Vice President, sir, and Yadav, sir. May I request Raj Kapoor ji, our chairman of New Zealand chapter. Thank you, President. Thank you. Thank you. May I request Raj Kapoor ji, our chairman of New Zealand chapter, to introduce our honorable guest speaker, CA Dr. Achinto Rai, sir.
Very good evening to all of you. Respected President, Vice President, and Additional Secretary Sri Amit Yadav ji. It gives me immense pleasure to give brief introduction of Mr. Achinto Rai. Dr. Achinto Rai teaches within the Deccan Business School, Deccan University, Australia. He holds a PhD in management from University of Canterbury, New Zealand. He is current member of the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India and the Institute of the Chartered Accountant of Australia and New Zealand. His broad research interests are in the area of business ethics, strategy, and international business and international student mobility. In 2021, he authored a research report on trade development between India and Australia. The research report was funded and published by the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, New Delhi. With this word, I welcome Dr. Achinto Rai. Thank you so much. It's a very interesting topic, and all the members will get benefit from this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raj Kapoor sir, for a very brief and nice introduction of the speaker of the day. Now, I should not be in between to the speaker and the audience. So I earnestly request CA Dr. Chintu Roy sir for his deliberation.
And we are really fortunate that our Honorable Additional Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Amit Yadav sir, will also be with us. And CA Dr. Chintu Roy ji is a very, very prominent researcher and chartered accountant. He is in the Deccan University in Australia, and he is having the expertise in this supply chain to Australia. We have come out good publications, sir. We'll certainly meet you and we'll discuss the things, how Indian companies can play a pivotal role in the supply chain to Australia. And this was published 2 years back.
Yeah, 2020.
In 2020. And after that, of course, now we are witnessing this economic cooperation and trade agreement between India and Australia. So over to you, Dr. Achinta Rai.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction, CA Anuj Goyal ji. I thank everyone for welcoming me, CA Raj Kapoor ji. I thank Sri Amit Yadav ji for his presence, Dr. Amit Agarwal ji for his presence, CA Rajendra Kumar, and our President and Vice President of the Institute. So before I start, I'm sharing the screen with you, which you can see now. And I hope to actually be able to, present the things as best as I can within the short span of time, because I'm mindful of the fact that Sri Yadav ji is going to leave at 5:30. So hopefully I will finish much before that, and there will be some opportunity for us to interact with questions and answers. So this is how it all started. I migrated to Australia and New Zealand about 24 years ago. And all the time, one of the things that came to my mind when I went to the supermarkets or I went shopping or buying something, the very little from India was seen on the shelves. And I used to ask myself this question, why I can't see Indian products here? Especially when the Indian products in many cases are far superior in terms of quality and price. And that used to be a puzzle for me. So anyway, that is another thing. It's a research area which I am looking at. But there came an opportunity when the CA, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, announced this funding, and I submitted this proposal, which, fortunate for me, it was received well, and I got the grant. The biggest problem during that period when I conducted the research was I had a very tight timeline, and we were under lockdown in Melbourne. Melbourne was one of the cities which had the longest lockdown in the history of that time during COVID. And we were in a situation where we couldn't actually go beyond 5 kilometers from our house. So that impeded a lot of things that I had intended to do. Nevertheless, I got key stakeholders over Zoom, over Skype, over the phone, spoke to them at length. These were qualitative interviews. And I got a lot of material, which I have presented in my report, which was published on 16th February 2021 by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Later this year, when the trade agreement was signed, the interim trade agreement, the ECTA, as it is called, Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, I was personally very happy. And I was very happy because this is the beginning of a great story between two great nations. So if we start looking at the background of the trade deal, this is exactly where it all started. So I'm trying to take this down so that this thing is not going to impede. So the trade deal was on cards for many years. So as Sri Yadav ji mentioned that for the last 10 years, there were practically nothing signed. So last really good trade agreement that India signed was in 2011. This is 2022. So this is a point in time when I'll have to help, just because I don't know whether you can see the entire screen at your end. I think I'll just get this down. Yeah, so the trade deal was on cards for a number of years. It started with a joint feasibility study between 2008 and 2010. And it is all there on the internet if you want to access it and have a look at it. So essentially, the feasibility studied the impact on both the nations the benefits of such an agreement. And numerous benefits were noted. Numerous possibilities were explored, and we came up with the understanding that this is going to be a beneficial thing. The best part of it is the story that took place in the recent times. Very rarely has two nations been so cooperative and so helpful to each other in signing a trade agreement. And that is apparent from the timeline it took. So on record, it is September 30th September 2021, that is 1st October 2021, the announcements were made. And we had the agreement by 2nd April 2022. And as Sri Yadavji pointed out, it was even shorter than that, meaning people at both ends spent a lot of time and money and energy doing things that needed to be done. So if you look at it, both governments have invested a lot of time and energy. And if you'd like to know more about how the negotiations took place, that is the link. You can take a look at it, and you will be amazed at how well the things went between the two nations. Yes, there was always a give and take. There was always something which somebody did not want to, straight away negotiate. But the best part of it is it worked out very well. We also must look at this ECTA in terms of not only what we see here, but also in terms of what is happening around the world. And one of the things, I'm really sorry, I'm trying to get So one of the things that we need to, before I get into the overview of the ECTA, the most important thing is we have to look at the relationship that is developing in our region, meaning between Australia and India in the Asia-Pacific region. And diplomacy is connected with economic diplomacy and geopolitics and trade. All these are interconnected. So when we look at what's happening with the Quad, where US, Japan, India, and Australia are the 4 members, you will suddenly look at a larger picture. You will notice that there's a bigger picture to all this. And the bigger picture to all this is a huge synergy of abilities. The United States with technical know-how and technology, especially in the area of artificial intelligence, especially in the area of robotronics. Of course, Germany has it, but United States is up there. Look at Japan. It has huge amounts of money which is available at cheap interest rates, literally cheap by any standards. Look at India, huge production capability, a great technical base. Look at Australia, huge potential in terms of the critical minerals that it has, the resources, the natural resources that it has. So if you look at the combination of these 4 in terms of the Quad, the geopolitics of the region, you can actually see a synergy of abilities and resources between 4 nations. And ECTA should also be seen in that light. So it's an interim agreement. It's not the final agreement, as Sri Yadavji also pointed out. It is likely to be confirmed by end of this year, and we are all hoping for that. The change in government in Australia should not affect this situation. In fact, both sides of the government, the opposition and the party in power, they've always been in favor of an agreement with India. If you look at one of the most important things, that is the Indian diaspora, and I'm going to talk about that, the contribution of the diaspora. They are also an important voice in the country, in Australia. So that matters. Number 2, which is most important, is that it is a comprehensive agreement, 14 chapters. The preamble is straightforward, 2 pages, but the 14 chapters really go in detail. And they go in detail, inter alia, they cover tariff commitments, something which both sides have given up, which they have never done for anybody else so well. So it's worth looking at. Rules of origin, which Sri Yadavji mentioned, very important because there are other ways things can go wrong. Recognition of trade barriers. Within that, there's a reference to dispute settlements. Dispute settlement is a very important mechanism because things go out of hand, relationships go bad, things don't work out. Sectoral information relevant to pharmaceuticals, telecom, financial services in particular. And most importantly, movement of natural persons and natural persons movement. Sorry, I don't know whether you're getting, okay, I'll put it this way, including working holiday visas and quotas in other visas. So I will come to each one. So what I did is I just read out all the things in brief. So the first two I have talked about. The points 3 and 4, I will just give you a deeper understanding. In terms of natural persons movements, the people-to-people relationship is valued at both ends. The people-to-people relationship is actually what matters. You can have endless trade agreements, and those trade agreements will become redundant if the private sector and the private business and private enterprise and people-to-people relations don't take off. And that is the big problem with any trade agreement. You take up a trade agreement, the governments are agreed upon, but the governments can't do business for you. They can't actually create, they can create the conditions conducive for business, but they can't really do the business for you all the time. They can do some things for you. And that is where the limitations of an agreement has to be recognized, that it is up to us as people, the professionals, the ICI, and I'm going to talk at length about that, as to how we can actually give impetus to this trade agreement, because this is a great opportunity for all, including the 4 members of the Quad. So you look at the Quad, you look at this agreement, and you say, yes, this is the beginning of a great story. So movement of natural persons. We are looking at something which is just a starting point. If you can achieve free movement of capital and labor in economic terms, you will achieve the best outcomes that is possible. The European Common Market or the EU being the best example. So that is what is a starting point. Working holiday visas, what is the meaning of that? Working holiday visas, because Australia has a tremendous shortage of people in the agricultural sector for simple things like picking berries, strawberries. You don't get people. So if somebody is a tourist, wants to stay back and earn some money to again go around the country, or just spend some time, they get the chance to work, get some money, and keep going. Young people would love to do that. And working holiday visa agreements are there with other countries like Canada, like United Kingdom. So this is with India, which is a fantastic thing from both countries' perspective. Look at the next part of it. This is the bigger part of it. How long will it take to reach the full potential? This agreement, how long will it take? It's up to us. It is up to us at both ends, the people to people. And this is where I'm going to talk about the Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora is the second highest taxpayer in Australia. The Indian diaspora sincerely puts in a lot of hard work. They face a lot of challenges when they come in, and they are willing to work and face those challenges. What it means that India has an asset. The Indian businesses have an asset in terms of that connection, that bridge, which can give you an insight into another culture. The Indian diaspora is about 700,000 strong today. It has grown rapidly in the last 20 years. And that is where the supply chain approach comes in. And I'm going to talk at length about the supply chain approach from a research strategy point of view. Why supply chain? Why not just export? So if you look at traditional views of trade, the traditional view of trade is to sell something, export something, buy something, and find a way to balance payments, and find a way to ensure that things run smoothly, and double taxation is avoided, and there is a possibility that people can, find better synergies in terms of what they buy and sell. But that is not actually what strategy tells you to do. Strategy, if you take a long-term view of strategy, and strategy, let me, you of course know the meaning of the word strategy, but I will draw on the meaning from the origins of the word. The origins of the word comes from the Greek strategos, meaning design to win, a plan of action to win. And this word was coined in the times of Alexander the Great when he set out to conquer the world. So every time Alexander sat with his generals, he created a plan, a design to win the war. Here we are not talking about winning wars. We are talking about winning hearts, markets, and all, because we want to have mutually beneficial relations. So the supply chain essentially is looking at the upstream and the downstream, and where can you add value to it. So today Australia might make more money, tomorrow India might make more money, or some businesses may make more money, somebody will make less money. It does not matter, because what matters is the fact that we are co-creating value. We are part of a value chain where if the product, say for example, we have a mineral which is in Australia, we want to take that raw ore and convert it into metal. That capability is there with India. The mineral is with Australia. Then to find uses for those, especially the critical minerals, there's enough market there between the Quad, for example. There's enough market outside the Quad in other trade blocks. And if you can get the value chain, the upstream and the downstream movement correct, you are going to make money every day. You're going to have a very good compact relationship, which is a relationship adding value and co-creating. I'll go back to this again. All this is not possible without investment. And investment is the biggest problem sometimes. Why? Because traditionally, if you look at investment, foreign direct investment in any country is a very difficult task. Yes, we can get investment by way of round tripping, which happens sometime, which is not the area I'm going to discuss. But we are not talking of round tripping. We are talking about serious investment in a country which you don't know. Difficult task. People do not trust in this part easily, the investment part. So how do you get that investment going? And that is where the biggest role can be played by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Chartered Accountants. We really need to get a long-term view of financing the supply chain approach. How are we going to get the money? How are we going to raise the money at both the ends? How are we going to get companies to buy into that? And how are you going to create the supply chain? That is the key point. From my research, this is what I would say. We need to look at two things very closely, three in fact, but two: supply chain, need for investment, connecting people, because all these things can happen with the first part, people to people. It cannot happen without people to people. So this is the whole logic of how we can reach the full potential of the agreement. Now, let us look at the best parts of the ECTA. The best parts is reduction and elimination of tariffs. So there are so many things on which both the sides have given up and given room to each other. And that is commendable. The goodwill, if you look at the way the things are worded, if you read the raw text and you think and you look at the charts of 0%, 0%, 0% here, and you say, well, how has this happened? It has happened because of goodwill. So the goodwill is there right now. The goodwill doesn't, see, goodwill is another thing. Goodwill doesn't remain for a long period of time unless it is not strengthened. What happens is that it is like a romance period and it starts fading. We don't want that to fade. And that is where we need to also look at the other side of it, taxation. And as Sri Yadavji explained, the taxation, the double taxation part for IT companies. That was a sticky point, and it is still a sticky point. So those are the things which create, dampers for goodwill. Those are the points where goodwill starts, taking softening or taking a backseat. We don't want that situation. The trade agreement recognizes that, and that is why the taxation, there are chapters devoted to taxation. The trade agreement recognizes that there are trade barriers. That's the best part of it. You look at it and you realize that yes, a lot of thinking has gone into it. A lot of hard work has gone into it. there has been a point where in Australia, at least I know of, in India, it must have happened, that stakeholder feedback was sought during 2020-21. 2021-22, that period. And many stakeholders provided their feedback to the trade negotiation authorities. And that came very useful when they drafted the barriers part. Then there is an element of, identification of certain sectors and industries that we can look at. That is like a straightforward sharing of market intelligence. Here it is, this is the industry, this is where you can actually do something. Please get into that role and do something about it. Now, who is going to look at the ECTA? I'm sure many people are looking at it. Who is going to act on it? And that is where we come in. We come in by understanding and recognizing that there are commitments which have been made by both the governments, serious commitments. Governments don't make commitments just like that. They have made very serious commitments. There's a lot of public time, money, and effort has gone into it at both ends. When it has gone into this kind of a situation, you look at some of the highlights here. So you look at some of the 4 key points that I have noticed. And maybe there are more. And I'm not putting up everything here because there's limitation of time. But what I'm attempting to do, and I'm an academic, I'm attempting to give you everything in a gist or in a summary form and planting seeds of thought. So the largest ever delegation from India to Australia. This is a big thing. The delegation was also organized in a very short period of time. 86% trade will be tariff-free or on concessions. Many areas, if you calculate, comes to roughly about 86%. Now, how did we calculate that? It's based on what we are able to see at this stage. We don't know what the future holds. But I would not stick to that 86. I would say, okay, substantial. The goal between both the nations is to lift trade to $45 billion in 3 years from now. This is doable. This is doable, and I think this is very conservative as compared to the potential. Finally, the goal to have India as one of the top 3 trading partners, currently in 7th place. And this is the best part of it. Why they want India as the top 3 trading partners? Because the Australian perception of India is it's a very reliable place. Why? Because the Indian diaspora in their workplaces are actually reliable people. They deliver. They do the job. They honor their words and commitments. And why do I mention this to you? Because there's a cultural side to it. So once you start looking at the representatives of a country who have come here from the country of origin, maybe they're Australian citizens, that connection works well in the minds of other people. So the top 3, we can actually become number 1, number 2. Australia can become India's largest trading partner, and so can India be. And these are some points to think on, reflect on, think through. Maybe I'm optimistic, but these are the things that I have picked up. Now, areas of growth, India and Australia. This has been repeated by different experts at different points, but I will give you my take on it. Resources and critical minerals is a very important area in the new world order, especially when you are looking at electric cars, especially when you're looking at things which are going to be operated by robotronic systems, especially where Industry 4 is right now in place. We really need to understand that the value of critical minerals that Australia has, India badly needs some of them. This is like a very good fit. And if we look at it, think over it, this is going to work. This is an area of growth. Education is an area of serious growth. I have been associated with, this is my 2nd career. And in this career, I have been there for 15 years, teaching both in Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand, I have been there for 2 years in an academic role, Australia for the last 13 years. And I have seen the tremendous interest in India. Why? Not just because we get international students from India, but many of these international students who come from India actually contribute hugely to the economies of this country. Not only that, they make very good citizens. So when you look at education, we are not talking just in terms of students, we are talking in terms of institutional linkages. There's so much to learn, so much to do. And to the best of my understanding, it is a difficult area even today because of a number of things. So for example, as an academic who was in charge of internationalization at one point, I actually set up programs in Indonesia, in Japan, in France, in Vietnam. I actually found it difficult to set up programs in India. And why I found it difficult is at that point in time, the processes were complex in some ways. Not that we have not succeeded. Some of our colleagues have succeeded. Recently, they have got some good success, but there is a lot of scope. In other words, there's a lot of space for growth. Sport, this is one area where our university, Deakin, is considered amongst the top universities in sports management. We have had sports personalities from India visiting us, our personalities going to Indian universities, etc. Sport is an area of huge growth between the two nations, and sport actually brings people together. Yes, there is an element of rivalry in cricket, and there's an element of, sometimes somebody loses, somebody wins. But if you look at the spirit of the game, spirit of sports overall, it brings people closer. Huge growth potential there. In terms of even the sports facilities, the way you manage sport, the way you actually train people. Australia has a lot to offer, and India has huge potential. Agribusinesses, this is one area which is a delicate area from the Indian perspective. And this is an area where there has to be a lot of give and take. And this will be an area of huge growth in the future, because food security is going to be the next big problem in the supply chain. Food security worldwide is in question at the moment. Global warming, climate change, these are very much real, it's happening. And that has some some effects on how you produce food, the quality of the food, etc. So food security is an area. Pharmaceuticals and chemicals is a huge area of growth depending on how the things are tackled. So these are some of the areas of growth which I have shared with you. There are many other areas of growth, minor ones and major ones. But these are the things that came to my mind as the ones which have the biggest potential as of today. So what is a supply chain approach, and why am I talking about a supply chain approach? So the supply chain approach essentially is the adoption of a comprehensive upstream and downstream long-term approach to building trade relations. It is understanding the customer at the other end. So if we have an Indian customer or a customer in India, or we have a customer in Australia and the Indian company is supplying, or the Australian company is supplying, we really need to understand the customer and their context, their usage context, their cultural context, their mindset. And we also need to, of course, understand the competition. Because if we understand the competition, then we will love this supply chain approach, because it looks at trade between two nations in a different way. I made this reference in my report. Why? Because it is an interdependent relationship between organizations who co-create value. You look at upstream and downstream collaborations. And this approach has been discussed at length in an article by Menzer, and there are many authors there, Menzer et al., 2001, 21 years ago. This particular article, from academic point of view, has been a huge, huge success. Almost 9,000 citations has been received by this article, which is an academic landmark for a single article to get 9,000 citations, roughly. And this is where the systemic strategic coordination comes of traditional business functions and tactics across the entire chain. So let me put it in terms of an example. So for example, if I am thinking in terms of a simple thing like lithium. Lithium is required in electric car batteries. In terms of solar energy, if you look at these two areas of huge potential growth of the future, there are so many things that can be done. India can be manufacturing the batteries. India has the manufacturing capability. The lithium batteries can be manufactured at both ends, but India can actually bring the cost down. If the supply chain India is there, it can bring the cost down. Australia can actually sell the lithium at a preferred price to India, which we have the MNF, most favored nation status, with wine, with whiskey. Why not with lithium, where we can actually not sell raw lithium? Australia sells raw lithium. There's no need to sell it. India can process it. And there can be a value-added product which comes from both ends. So you can have a company, an Indo-Australian company. You can have a publicly listed company, which actually goes into this in a big way. So what I'm saying here is that the amount that you can envision and dream, there is no limit to it in the supply chain approach. You can just pick up any product, look at the international market, think of what you can do with it, think of where you can find value for your customer in terms of price and quality and delivery, because today the supply chains are all in a state of array, disarray. How do you bring that synergy? Think about it. And that is where the biggest value lies. And this is where I will go on to something very important. This is where the ICAI comes in. This is where we as chartered accountants at both ends come in. We really need to think in terms of an investment body. We should not leave it to governments. Why? Because the governments can do a great job of it. But at the end of the day, the private enterprise matters. Without private enterprise, you cannot actually achieve the best outcomes. What I mean by that is, you want to monitor returns on investment. You want to monitor performance. You want to be able to pick up the phone and negotiate without going through a long process, which takes up a lot of time. And that is where the private enterprise comes in. So a joint investment body is something the Institute should actually recommend, think of, float the idea. And that is one very important thing. We need a dual listing framework. Many Australian companies have dual listings. Dual listings are difficult to manage. So you have a company called BHP. They had a dual listing in Australia and in the UK. You have Australian companies which are dual listed in Australia and Singapore Stock Exchange. Think about the amount of money that you can raise if you look at a quad stock exchange listing, or if you look at a stock exchange listing between India and Australia. And when I keep talking about Australia, there's a very interesting thing that we miss, that there is New Zealand, which is actually very close to Australia geographically. Not culturally same, but culturally similar in some ways. And that is another place which has huge potential. One of the biggest stumbling blocks, and this is from my research, is the banking cooperation. You try dealing with banks at both the ends. Both the ends, the business people find it difficult to deal with the banks. Even as individuals, as the Indian diaspora, if you actually interview the Indian diaspora and talk to them about their banking experience with banks, and please make no mistake, I'm not talking about public sector banks, which we always have the habit of putting them down. No, it is some of these private star banks. The private means publicly listed banks from India, which are big names. Their service, people are not happy. And when I say this is where the problems come. So that lack of cooperation increases cost of trade. It increases cost of transactions. So we need to actually eliminate forest risks and other trade risks. And that is where the ICAI comes in. How do you do that? How do you bring about a synergy between the banking systems of the two nations? This is not something which is to be taken lightly. Because when you look at the bank charges, you look at the foreign exchange differences, you look at what price the bank sells you the Australian dollar and what price it buys from you, especially in huge transactions. There is a lot of room for improvement. And there's a lot of room for improvement in customer service, the way it goes. So this is one thing. So ultimately, ICAI is in a position to look for professional services collaboration. Now, this is where I need to also mention three simple things. One thing is we are already doing a good job. Yes. We are looking at mutual recognition. Yes. But there is still scope to do more. The third part is we need to do more. And where can we do more? We can do more by creating some kind of an investment kind of seminars where we bring in all these things, the banking and investment and finance, we bring people from the industry together. And we look at it as to how can we strengthen the ECTA. Straightforward. How do we strengthen the ECTA? So this is the role that we can play as professionals. And of course, there's a big reward. There's a rainbow. And at the end of the rainbow, there's a pot of gold. And that is for us. And what is it? It is the professional business, the services that we can get out of it. There's plenty of scope there because there's no one. It's like a green zone where we just need to go and get into action. And this is something which is my personal take on it. Maybe some people might have a different view, but I'm an optimistic and I would like to look at it from that point of view. So I go on to my report, and this is the report which was published in Jan 2021. And then the final version was published in Feb 2021. So Jan, I presented it on 17 January 2021. The first draft was ready before 31st, and the final publication came out on 16 Feb. So the aims of the report at that point in time was to assess business opportunity. And this was a very simple report. It is a very thin report. The most comprehensive report was written by Peter Verghese, Mr. Peter Verghese, who was the head of the DFAT and currently Chancellor of University of Queensland. His report is called the India Economic. From that, we have drawn the IES, the India Economic Strategy 2035. It has been updated. It's a wonderful thing to read because you go deep and you start reflecting and thinking. I have read that report, but my report is restricted on the basis of stakeholder feedback. And I have looked at some specific areas. So what have I looked at? Looked at business opportunities. What have I looked at? Supply chain approach. What have I looked at? Systemic and perceived. Systemic is already there. Perceived is how we look at things. This is a very important thing. Perception actually creates a lot of problems. And why the perception creates the problems is because many a time we perceive things in our context without putting ourselves in the shoes of the other person. So I have provided some practical recommendations for implementation, which I'm not going in deep, but I'm just mentioning a few things here. So you look at the status of the current trade, and this is a year before now. We have more data available, and you see this is the bulk of it, and this is from DFAT I have taken. But please don't pay a lot of attention to this because things have changed after this. Essentially, what I'm saying is that pearls and gems is one thing which we need to look at. You look at the growth year on year, worth looking at. Why is this growth there? Worth looking at. What is the influence of Bollywood movies on Australian youth? Worth looking at. So there are a lot of cultural undercurrents, changes that are taking place. So to give you an example, if you talk about weddings, one of the wedding themes in Australia, which is a very popular theme, not amongst just Indians, okay? It's nothing to do with Indians per se or people of Indian origin. Anybody, young Australian couples talk about a Bollywood wedding as a theme. And that's an area to look at. Why? Because see, they love it. If they love something, what it essentially means is there's a connection, a positive connection already. So this is one thing which I wanted to point out. The other growth areas, and I'm on the last two slides because we will have sufficient time for Q&A. So these are 16 growth areas which I have identified in the report. And 10 of these areas are listed here. So these are some of the things, Ayurvedic and herbal products. Of course, there are some hoops to go through and some approvals to get, but there are ways to get approvals for the Ayurvedic and herbal products. The education tech market, solar energy, wind power, Suzlon is already in India. There are so many Indian companies right now. Mahindra is there, Tata is there, Adani is there. And there are many other players, smaller and bigger. So you look at all the things that I have listed here. These are the areas where stakeholders or people who are interested are seeking de-risking the supply chain, meaning they do not want to depend on one particular nation or one particular supplier. They want synergy. The best way to get a synergy is to get investment at both ends. Because if somebody is invested in capital in the Indian production facilities and simultaneously Indian shareholders hold shares in Australian companies, nothing like it. And that is where pharmaceuticals, 16 billion of pharmaceuticals we are talking about. And this is IBIS World. IBIS World is an industry database which I have used. So are sourced from these countries, very small quantities from China and India. And this is something which Sri Yadavji mentioned. Textiles and fabrics. And again, this is where can supply fabric that is much of what is being currently purchased. This was the stakeholder feedback. Household electricals. And you look at this, are sourced from China. So we have a space to look at. There's a huge opportunity there as well, because in Australia, the building industry is always in the construction mode. New houses are being constructed, roads are being constructed, rail links are being constructed. So many things are being, the infrastructure development is continuous, especially in the state where I live in Victoria. Then you look at chemicals and allied products. Sorry, I've shifted. Chemicals and allied products. You look at this. And then you go further down to plastics and footwear industry. So these are some of the things that I had picked up. I had identified 16, picked up the top 10, and these are the top 6 to look at. Maybe there is research further down the track which may say that this is not the only ones, or there may be something else. So I am open to stand corrected there, but this is what was the work that I did way back in 2020. This was done the entire research was done between August 2020 and the first part of January 2021. So this is where I have made these recommendations within my report, because this is to gain confidence. This is the second point, is my recommendation. We need an e-commerce platform to connect people. An e-commerce platform which is actually run, or at least which has rules that apply to it on the basis of some governmental oversight at both ends, is not something which can be exploited by somebody straight away. And point 3, which I mentioned, improved banking services, it goes without saying. Finally, cultural nuances in communication. There are a lot of things where we make a mistake. And we think, why did this person say this? Why did this person write like this? Why did this person behave in this manner? And frankly speaking, after looking at this from as a cultural insider come outsider, I can simply say that human beings are of different types, different varieties. People have different ways of looking at it. But if we are going to be really successful in trade and business and in economic diplomacy, if I may say, we need to actually take a step back and look at the context in which other people operate. And once we start looking at it from their perspective, and then we come back to our perspective, we might have a different perspective. So with this, I thank you for your attention, and all those who have been there in the webcast. I am open to questions, and I hope, Sri Yadavji, I have been able to manage things within the timeline.
Thank you, CA Dr. Achinto Rai ji.
Sir, can you close screen sharing?
Yeah. I've done it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a wonderful deliberation, and thank you, our Honorable Additional Secretary, Sir, Yadav, Sir, for your presence during the session. And before taking up the queries, may I request Yadav, Sir, to give his observations, and then we will take up the query for which Achinto Rai, Sir, or Yadav, Sir, can respond. So may I request Yadav, Sir, for his observations, please.
Thanks, and I should really compliment Dr. Achinto Roy for a wonderful presentation, and I can make out the way he's presented it and so on and so forth. So I would say that he is probably a less CA and a more academic and a scholar. And why I say that is the way in early 21, during the time of COVID, he came out with this forward-looking report, and which actually, though I never saw that report, but I can tell you the elements which he has put in are prophetic in the sense, and this shows his rigor and his understanding, deep understanding on what he was mentioning, actually finding part and resonating in our final trade agreement. And I think so. We need to have a conversation, and as we go for the second part of the bilateral trade negotiations, the final comprehensive, and learn from his experience and deep depth. But coming, I think those important things I just like to add, and actually in a way, I wanted to keep my inputs very limited, and I think so large part of it has been covered by Dr. Achinto Roy. But frankly, if you see, the important thing is, one, Australia has a low contribution of manufacturing in its GDP. And that shows that it is largely it is dependent on manufactured goods. It is surplus in raw material and large amount of mineral and raw materials, like whether it's coal or whether it's minerals or whether it's even petroleum and so on and so forth. It can meet its demand and serve to the world. But on manufacturing, as part of policy and all, the contribution is very low. That being the case, I think so, when the tariff reduction has come down for certain sectors in the bilateral, whether it's gems and jewelry, whether it's leather, whether it's footwear, whether it's textile, and so on and so forth, that would be that margin which is there because of the tariff. Indian goods would be competitive, Indian manufactured goods would be competitive. And that's the great advantage we are going to have. For a gems and jewelry, tariff reduction of even 2% makes all the difference. We all know that. And similarly, in the leather, footwear, the textile sectors, and large number of other manufactured goods, including high-value technical goods also, we will be competitive. And that has to be looked at as what Dr. Achinto Roy was saying with regard to the Quad. The Quad arrangement is a strategic arrangement, but obviously it's getting into elements of trade part of it also. And being the strategic partnership, which is between the four nations, India, Australia, Japan, and US, we are already integrated with Australia now, and we are already integrated with Japan. So in one sense, and then now with the India-Pacific Economic Forum, to some extent, as we move in, it may not be trade in the classical sense of trade with regard to tariffs and so on and so forth, but in other manners and other sectors, it would be integrated. And one of the topic in that is supply chain, which Dr. Achinto Roy has talked about. And in that supply chain, I think so the important thing is the other initiative which India has taken forward is a supply chain resilience initiative, where India, Australia, and Japan are talking a resilience, more reliance not only on one trading partner, but moving away from more than one trading partner. And I think so that finds resonance with Australia, and in their low contribution in their economy of manufactured goods, they are also trying to move away from one of the major suppliers, for which if you see sector-wise top sectors, the list which exists, in most of those, China would find the mention, and therefore they are looking for partners, reliable partners, stable partners, democratic partners, countries which have a rule of law, and so on and so forth. Where they're moving out from that China large reliance. So again, that is another issue which builds value to this agreement. I think so. What Dr. Achinto Roy said is part of our agenda, a roadshow and taking over, going across to Australia for investment and so on and so forth is part of our agenda once the agreement is signed. We already in initial discussions with various associations on that part of it. And we would welcome our ICA partners also to join in for that. The sector-wise, I think, so financial service, there is a separate annex, but other than financial services, we are now talking of education, a twinning arrangement, which sure, as the cost of education for Indian students goes down. And part of it can be done in India and part of it can be done in Australia. And still they can take the benefit of the agreement for the visa, work study, post-study work visa. So that is, I think, so the other important sector which is there. And all of these sectors where the goods tariff would come down in Australia are also our labor-intensive sector. So our studies show that there would be a large benefit in the coming years, not only in the trade volume, but also in the potential for employment within the country because of trade. So I think so. Lot to say about it, and as they say, the taste of any is finally in the eating. So the proof of pudding is in actually eating. So I think so. Both me and Dr. Achinto Roy have talked about what it can do and the benefits the diaspora has and the soft power and so on and so forth. All of these are a part of it. We have a specific push for audiovisual services, which was almost a closed service in Australia as part of our agreement. So I think so we can go on, but I think so we are both propagating what Dr. Achinto Roy as a practitioner, as an academician has done, and we as governments have tried to do. And finally, it is the governments do it and then just move out. We facilitate, we support, but finally the investment and the risk and the challenges all have to be done by by individuals, private persons, companies, and that's where we put in a framework, we put in an agreement, and now we believe that needs to be taken forward by businesses and by individuals and by associations and so on and so forth. That's where I think so. ICAI also can play a big role. I think so. The soft power of culture, which you talked about, is again, it finds resonance in a specific visa category we've managed to get for Australia on two of the important elements, which again are soft power. One is the Indian cuisine, so Indian chefs, and the other is the yoga teachers. And 1,600 or 1,800, I don't remember.
1,800. 1,800.
1,800 visa category visas per annum are part of that agreement. So I think so. The government has taken up the challenge, tried to do the best. Now it's for the entrepreneurs, the businesses, the association, the big companies, the small companies, the service providers, and across the spectrum who need to leverage and take advantage and build synergies and build value chains, build supply chains. Supply chain would be a very important part on it because there the cost competitiveness also will come. Other than the other challenges which may be there on the pricing part of it. Finally, on trade and especially on goods, two things become very, very important. One is obviously the cost of the product, and the second is the quality of the product. So if those you are cost competitive and you are quality, definitely you will find buyers across the world. So I'll stop there, and I think so. I have made my point a lot, but keeping the conversation going, and I think so. We are in reliable hands of Dr. Achinta Roy for any Q&A. I will have to leave, though much I would have liked to take questions, learn, and respond and educate myself from those questions. I have no, now I've reached the deadline. So I think so I'm leaving there. But thank you so much. Thanks the ICI, thanks the research committee in giving us an opportunity. And as I said, we will continue with this interaction between the ministry and the ICA for future also. And thanks, personal thanks to Dr. Achinta Roy. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are having certain queries. Queries with you, and we are having the presence of our honorable Central Council member and Vice Chairman of the Research Committee, CA Umesh Sharma sir. A very, very big round of applause for CA Umesh Sharma sir. Umesh Sharma sir is a wonderful faculty, very renowned faculty on the indirect taxes, particularly on GST from Aurangabad, and he's contributing like anything for the cause of the profession, for the cause of the members, for the cause of the students. Thank you very much, sir, Umesh Sharma sir. Raj Kapoor sir, do you have any query? In the meanwhile, I am taking one query of Sagar Tawar. Is the ECTA beneficial for India only as per the economic perspective, or also for the strategic regions? Achintu sir.
So if I understand the question correctly, the question is the institute beneficial for India or for other strategic reasons? Am I right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the institute is of great relevance for all strategic purposes. It depends on how much, as an institute, we want to define ourselves in terms of what we want to do. Like I said, the ICAI has a tremendous opportunity in setting up an investment banking seminar kind of a thing where we get people across from both nations. We get people across from both nations to talk. We can get the banking, finance, industry, everybody together. And if we play that role, we are looking at a huge potential for strategic purposes, not just for India, but for also Australia. I hope I have answered your question, but feel free to ask me again.
Yeah,
Sagar
thank you.
ji.
Then, Then we are having another query. What the banking companies should do to eliminate the forex and other trade risks to safeguard the industries and foreign exchange reserves?
We need serious banking cooperation between both the sides. And when we talk about banking cooperation, the best thing is, see, already there are banks like ANZ of Australia has a call center in Bangalore. It also has branches in India. But we do not have, like State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda has branches this side. But we really do not have that synergy. What I mean by that is, if you are dealing with another bank, one bank in Australia, another one in India, you will usually find it becomes very difficult for the people who are doing business. So we have to find some way. I don't know the mechanism, how we are going to do that within the banking law. But the easiest thing could be, if a bank has branches at both ends, they should be able to service you the best. And Indian banks should be encouraged to actually look at this market in a, more comprehensive way. Because Australian banking industry is based on 4 banks and 2 small banks. The 2 small banks may not come. The 4 banks, they may come, or they might come in collaboration with the Indian banks. But India has a lot of banks which might be in a position to do that.
Then we are having one query. What is the significance of ECTA for Australia?
huge significance for Australia. Australia is in a position to sell a lot of things to India without tariff or with low tariff. One of the biggest opportunities for Australia is in the wine industry. So export of wine is a very big thing. When we talk about export of wine, I did mention wine, but I think I missed that particular one. So I will just share this. What happened is I think I missed this one, this slide, when I was changing slides. So agreement is complemented by a number of ministerial side letters. What is a ministerial side letter? It is an agreement of a kind, a written understanding that operates in practice between two governments for them to consider in the final version of the trade agreement. So when you look at the side letters, Australian wine and Indian alcoholic beverages and whiskey. So Australians can sell wine from the Australian perspective. Organic goods. From the Australian perspective, meat is a big export. Wool is a big export. So those are the things that have benefited the most. And from the Indian perspective, it is alcoholic beverages, whiskey, post-study visas, organic goods from both ways, working holiday visas and taxation. So this is based on side letters. These are not really part of the agreement, but this is a definition of a side letter. I'm sorry I missed that when I was changing slides.
Yeah, and then next query is, thank you very much. With any free trade agreement, the question of the safeguard of the domestic industry remains due to the concessions allowed for imports. Are there any provision to safeguard the domestic industry in ECTA?
See, that ECTA has been drawn up on the basis of some feasibility studies that were done in 2008 to 2010, and the impact has been studied on industries at both ends, and that has been taken care of, I believe. However, I would look at it as a chartered accountant, as an academic, I would look at it differently. If I start thinking about protection of our domestic industry in the year 2022, I would like to look at it differently. What I would suggest is think of how you can integrate the domestic industry with the international business, with the international supply chain, bring them together. So make the domestic industry a part of the supply chain. That is why I keep talking about the supply chain. So domestic industry does not need to manufacture everything, but domestic industry can improvise and become part of a supply chain and make more money with assured business, less expense on marketing and advertising.
Yeah, thank you. We are having the presence of CA Raj Kapoor ji, Chairman New Zealand chapter of ICI. Raj Kapoor ji, do you have any query? You want to ask anything?
I have only one thing. There is no doubt that the Indian chartered accountants are well capable and work anywhere in the world. Only problem they face is a visa for our professional. Were there any concession for the Indian chartered accountant to enter in Australia after this agreement?
No, unfortunately not. Because in Australia, the only way the Indian chartered accountants can make it is by getting the local registrations. But local registration does not mean, because when you look at the immigration law, there is no special category for chartered accountants. There's a category for accounting technician. And accounting technician can be anybody with a diploma in accounting with substantial experience. But unfortunately, no. I have not come across anything.
Even after this agreement, there would not be any possibility. If we are talking of the supply of the
no, this agreement does not cover that. That is where I suggested the ICAI has the greatest opportunity of creating investment, banking, finance. So when you create that, you can also talk about the recognition part of Indian chartered accountants.
That is important. That is important.
Yeah, that is very important.
Yeah, that is
Because
right.
my first experience, when I went for admission to the University of Canterbury, they said we do not take your chartered accountancy qualification into account at all.
Yeah. And they are just equivalent to graduate of New Zealand. That's
Yes,
all.
they
Level
actually, if I
6,
tell
level
you,
6
if
or
I
7 or
share
8.
this with you, you will be amazed. In 1998, they asked me to do a third year level, final year level accounting unit. And I said, I looked at the book and I said, see, this is something which I can just talk about the whole thing. I can explain to you.
Yes.
They said, no, you have to do this.
But
So-
our institute should be enter in these things, and they should solve these problems, because there must be a recognition of our profession, because it is the toughest in India, what I
It
feel.
is. It is. See, I have
So-
gone through the registration process here in Australia. It's
Yeah.
not that difficult.
Yes. So I will request the Anuj to do something from the level of the institute. That is very important issue for all over the world. We are very
Yes, yes,
capable.
I
We
think
can
we
do
are-
anything wherever we are. But the problem is entering in the country is a difficult, very difficult.
Yeah. So the same thing apply to their accounting
Yes.
professionals also. So we are. I am also one of the group member, and we are having a continuous dialogue to see that how we can come out of any solution in this. Right. So may I request CEO Umesh Sharma ji, our honorable Vice Chairman of the Research Committee, to ask any query if he's having, and then for the concluding remarks, one or two query I will ask. Umesh sir, you are having any query for Achinto Rai sir?
No, sir, I am listening.
Okay, and one query I am asking CA Santosh H. Doshi from Pune, how ECTA is going to address cyber security?
ECTA does not have clear provisions on that, except in telecommunication area, there are some agreements, but these are things which are preliminary discussed. So the cyber security may not be a public document. We do not know whether there is a side letter or whether there is something else which we are not, I am not aware of it.
Yeah. Then we will be having that last query. After that, we will be having concluding remarks by CEO Umesh Sharma sir, our honorable Vice Chairman, and the vote of thanks. Parag Kotak ji from Western Region, Mumbai, is a US CPA considered for visa purposes, that is considered as an accountant.
I will not know this. This is a
Umesh ji-
visa query.
Yeah,
I have
Umesh
no
ji, want
idea
to
about it.
respond?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So we'll respond it separately to the queries individually. And thank you very much, Achinto Rai sir. Please stay with us, because we are eagerly waiting for the concluding remarks and the vote of thanks by our honorable Vice Chairman, CA Umesh Sharma ji from Western Region, from Aurangabad. And thank you very much, Raj Kapoor sir. May I request, we are having the presence of Dr. Amit Agarwal ji, our honorable secretary of the research committee, as well as committee on financial markets and investors protection. So may I request Dr. to say a few words, and then we'll request CEO Umesh Sharma ji, our honorable vice chairman, for his final words and the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Chairman, sir, for giving me opportunity to address this August viewers in this very, very important topic on trade agreement between India and Australia. And I'm proud to say with all the viewers that under the able guidance of my chairman, and continuously he's chairing this committee, and the then president, CA Atul Gupta ji, the visionary president who has given this opportunity that we came out with this scheme, research project scheme. And this is the product of that scheme. That first time in ICI we came out with such kind of a study, and the results of and findings of these studies being shared with the government, and somehow the outcome of these studies were used by government in this agreement. So thank you, Achinto sir, for your contribution that study. I think you are the 90% is your contribution, 10% from my chairman leadership, and nothing, my contribution as such, nothing, just to coordinate the things. But really, we are in depth that we have the member like you who is very passionate for the profession and for country. At Australia, you always keep discussing on how we can improve better relation with Australia, how we can improve our professional competence and other things. So my learned vice chairman is with us, so I would not take much time. I would earnestly request my vice chairman for his concluding remarks and guiding words. Over to Umesh Sharma, sir.
Yes, thank you, Amitji. It's always a pleasure to give vote of thanks in such a virtual meeting, which is naming Understanding Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement with India and Australia. When I was wondering, what is the meaning of Achito? Because
Ochinto.
Achito, yeah.
is a name, Sanskrit name of Lord Shiva.
Yeah, it's a Sanskrit name of Lord Shiva, and the qualities are goodness, calmness, stability, and a loving person who loves his neighborhood also. So, sir, you are from India, you are in Australia, and you are bridging the gap between the two countries, though they are not neighboring countries, but virtually we feel that you are sitting aside to us, and you are a bridge between India and Australia by way of your academics. So thanks for your knowledge sharing, sir, and thanks for bridging the gap between Indians and Australians and the CA profession. And whatever discussion we had with Amit Yadav ji and Raj Kapoor ji, Raj Kapoor ji is a famous hero, Raj Kapoor, but now he is in New Zealand. So we are missing him in Australia, in India. So thanks for the knowledge of sharing between New Zealand, Australia, and Indian trade agreement, sir. Thanks to all the participants for their queries. And when we look toward the concluding points of this today's discussion, under the able chairmanship of Anuj Goyal ji and our secretary Amit Agrawal ji, we will take note what are the roles and responsibilities of ICI as suggested by you and the participant and Raj Kapoor ji, and the recognition of chartered accountant, the issues of visa. We will try level best to do the needful. Further, the trade agreements and the advantages, disadvantages you have shared very deliberately, and the ECTA effects. Further, the effects on the technological sector, education sector, banking sector, energy, food sector, you have discussed widely. So thanks for your such a wide knowledge. And at last, whatever issues are there for the visa related to the CAs and recognition, we will take it up. So thanks to all the participants, and I wish them a happy learning, and hope a delegation will move from India to Australia under our leader Anuj Goyal ji soon. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to Umesh sir, and of course, Indian chartered accountants are playing very active role in Australia as well as in New Zealand. But I think our chartered accountants can play more active role there. So we'll certainly like to see that how our chartered accountants can get the proper opportunity, proper recognition in Australia as well as New Zealand, so that that part of the world can also get the opportunity to use the full potential of the members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, who are undoubtedly the best accounting professionals, not only in our country, but across the globe. So we'll certainly like to see that how we can have our presence in a better manner in Australia as well as New Zealand. We have already planned one international RRC at New Zealand, and it can be extended to Australia also. I think both the countries are quite near and are having the same culture. So we'll try to have how both the countries can be covered, and our Vice Chairman, CEO Umesh Sharma ji, will be leading that international RRC on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Research Committee. So thank you very much, Achinto Rai sir. Thank you very much, Raj Kapoor ji, who has been now in New Zealand, and we are missing in India in a great way. And thank you very much, C. Umesh Sharma ji, our gem of the profession and the Central Council member from the western part of the country, from Aurangabad. And he is an expert on the GST. And we would like to see that how we can have some very good program on GST also in collaboration with the New Zealand chapter, Raj Kapoor ji. I have already discussed with Raj Kapoor ji. We will be having one session, a VCM in close coordination with the New Zealand chapter soon, in which the resource person will be our Honorable Central Council member from Aurangabad, C. Umesh Sharma ji. Thank you, Dr. Amit Agarwal ji, and the entire team of the research committee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all the viewers. We were around more than 1,000 viewers from each and every part of the world. Thank you, Ajinto Rai sir. Thank you very much. So nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.